Okay, so we can go ahead and start. Gauraganya Gana Gotra Goloruharam Gauranga Guritama Gopyata Kopa Briksham Gopala Gada Ratidam Yati Singha Gora Govinda Deshi Kavadam Satatam Namami Uttama Adama Kichuna Bachila Jachiya Jile Kakola Kahe Premananda Emona Gauranga Hridaya Dariya Bola Vaja Gauranga Kaha Gauranga Laha Gaurangera Namare Jai Jana Gauranga Bhaje Se Hoyamara Pranare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Yashaiva Padambuja Bhakti Labhya Prema Bidana Parama Pumarta Tasmai Jagan Mangala Mangalaya Chaitanya Chandraya Namo Namaste Chaitanya Chandraya Namo Namaste Chaitanya Chandraya Namo Namaste Madgavirapi Gopala Svikriyat Kripaya Jari Tadaiva Sambhaya Pidva Rishe Yustat Priya Janaha Shri Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Sasanatana Rupaka Gopala Raghunatha Brajabala Bapahimam Vancha Kalpadurubhischa Kripa Sindhu Vyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we're on the 20th verse of the Mangalacharna prayers of my Guru Maharaj from Chaitanya Charitamrita. We can, I think I have on the screen here, you can look and see. Ananda lilamaya vigrahaya hema vidibhya chavisundaraya tasmai mahaprema rasa pradaya Chaitanya Chandraya Namo Namaste Chaitanya Chandraya Namo Namaste. O Lord Chaitanya Chandra, O Lord whose form is full of blissful pastimes, O Lord whose complexion is as splendid as gold, O Lord who gives in charity the nectar of pure love for Lord Krishna, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. It's from Chaitanya Chandramrita, text 11. So, let's see here. I'd like to continue with the same commentary on Prabodhananda Saraswati Thakur's Chaitanya Chandramrita that we were reading from in our last session. It's Rasik Aswadani Tika by someone named Anandini. It was appreciated greatly by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and we mentioned a little something about him, mostly how we know very little about him except that he was a madman for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and he wrote this commentary which is highly appreciated by Gaudiya Vaishnavas. So let's analyze this verse a little bit and try to understand why it's included in his Mangalacharna prayers for Guru Maharaj. So he's speaking about Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu here, who is the vigraha, or the embodiment, or whose form is ananda lilamaya. Moya means, or moya means to be full of. Ananda lilamaya vigrahaya. His form is full of ananda lila, the most ecstatic, blissful pastimes. Ananda means pastimes of prema. He's Himabi Dibya Chavisundaraya. His complexion is transcendental. It's sundarai. It's very, very beautiful. And it's hemaba. It's golden colored. And this particular form of the Lord, he's saying it tasmai maha prema rasha padaya, that he's given not just prema, or he's not just giving rasa, but he's giving prema ras, not just prema ras, but he's giving maha prema rasa pradaya, which, as we discussed in some of our previous sessions, indicates the mood of the Sakis and Manjaris. Chaitanya Chandraya Namo Namaste. We offer obeisances to him again and again, that personality who's the moon-like Chaitanya. So, Madhur Ujjvala Prema. There's several points being made in this verse. And the first is that he's given as a distributor of this Madhur Ras, this Madhur Ujjvala Ras, Madhur Ujjvala Prem. We find a similar verse which perhaps might have been based on this verse today in the pranam mantra to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, which I'll also put on the screen here. Let's see. Madhurojala Premadya Shri Rupa Nuga Bhakti Shri Gora Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namostute. He's offering obeisances to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. This verse was written by Puri Das, who's also known as Ananta Vasudeva, who Srila Bhaktisiddhanta once said was like his right hand, and Sundarananda Vidyavinod like his left hand. And there was some controversy about those persons. I don't want to get into that. But he had a dream once about Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, revealing his Sakhi's Manjari Swarup. And he went to his Guru Maharaj and asked him about it, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta just laughed and didn't refute anything. And later he wrote these prayers. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is that personality who's Madhur Ojjala Premaja Shri Rupa Nuga Bhaktida. He's we're offering obeisances to him, and because he's giving this Madhur Ras, which is an Ujjvala Ras, it's very, very effulgent, very, very brilliant Ras. He's giving this prem, which is enriched with the mood of Rupa Goswami and the followers of Rupa Goswami. He's Bhaktida. He's giving this type of bhakti. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, therefore, he's Sri Gora Karuna Shakti, where he's the Shakti, the Karuna Shakti of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He's a personification of that, the Vigraha. Namostute, we offer our obeisances to him. So this verse, this pranam mantra of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, as I mentioned, is very similar to this verse that we're looking at today, because this verse we're speaking about also speaks about this Mother Ujjvala Rasa, Sri Mahaprema Rasa Pradaya. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, he embodies that, and therefore he's Gora Karuna Shakti. So we could extrapolate from this another point, that those devotees who are Rupanugas, who are followers of Rupa Goswami, they're Madhur Ujjvala Premadya. They're endowed with this Madhurja Ras. They're able to give this topmost bhakti, and therefore they're Gora Karuna Shakti. They're the embodiments of the mercy potency of Gauranga Mahaprabhu. So in this verse we're reading from today, we're offering obeisances to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is freely giving Tasmai Mahaprema Rasa Pradaya. He's freely giving this rasa. How is he doing that? He's doing that through the devotees. And we've discussed in several previous sessions how Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, or we should say Sri Krishna, not Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sri Krishna, doesn't have mercy himself. My grandma used to put it in this way, in a very sweet way. You say, if you go to Krishna and you say, hey, Krishna Karuna Sindhu, you're the ocean of mercy, Krishna will say, I'm sorry, that mercy is no longer with me. It's with my devotees. You should go there. And this is described in many places in our Gaudiya literature, that the Vaishnava is Krishna Kripa Sri Murti. He's the embodiment. He's the vigraha, as we hear about Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. He's the vigraha of the Karuna Shakti. So, along with that, it's not just that all devotees are Karuna Shakti because they go out and distribute books and they tell people you should be vegetarian and about reincarnation. But because he's a Rupanuga and because he's realized this Mother Ujjvala Premadya, he's an Adya means to be endowed with or to possess. He has this Mother Ujjvala Prema. Therefore, he's really a Rupanuga devotee. So this is Mother Ujjvala Prema that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is given as a distributor of the highest form of love of God. But as we've discussed, and just to touch on again, he does that through his devotees, and therefore Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, he says in the famous lecture we often quote about the associates of Sri Chaitanya, that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is an extended subject. And it's necessary to worship all the forms of the Lord, including the devotees, if we want to worship Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in a proper way. So tasmai, unto you, this is you. He's identifying Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in this way, that he's ananda lilamaya vigrahaya. He's the embodiment of the ananda lila. He's that thing. How is that? Does it mean because he's memorized Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu quoted so many verses from the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, or because he spoke so much of it? No, because he's moi. He's ananda lilamaya. He's the embodiment of that thing. He's the last limit of it. And my Guru Maharaj gave the example. He said that even if Radha and Krishna are there, if Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is not there, we don't want to go there. He said it's just like a green mango. It's an unripe mango. This morning I was going for a walk in the forest and picking some leaves and flowers and things, and I saw some man and his wife, and they climbed into a tree and they're picking green mangoes. You use them for achar. You can use for a few things, but they're not as nice as the ripe mangoes. They're not as easy to digest. They're not as versatile as a ripe mango. They're not nearly as sweet. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the embodiment of the Ananda Lila of Radha and Krishna. He's the embodiment. When Radha and Krishna's Lila comes to the topmost wave and it manifests a form, then it's known as Ananda Lilamaya. Ananda Lilamaya. It's that form which is vigrahaya, that form which is full of Ananda Lila, and that's Gauranga Mahaprabhu. And who is this Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? He's Ananda Lilamaya Vigrahaya. This is who he is. He's the embodiment of this bliss. He's always engaged in divine rasa. And he's part of Krishna Lila. My Guru Maharaj used to say that Gaura Lila is Krishna Lila, is Gaura Lila is Krishna Lila. And just so when you write a book, if you finish a book and there's something which more needs to be said at the end of the book, you call that a parishishta in Sanskrit, which means an appendix. You're adding something on to the end of the book. And it's non-different from the book. So this is Gauranga Mahaprabhu. He's Ananda Lilamaya Vigrahaya. He's the embodiment of the topmost wave of Radha Krishna Lila, when Radha and Krishna come together. And therefore, he's Hemaba. Hemaba means that he has a golden complexion. He captivates everyone. That's the nature of gold. Gold attracts everyone. And because he's because he's adopted the mood and complexion, Radha Bhava Jyoti, because he's adopted the Bhava, then also the duty, the complexion of Srimati Radharani comes along with it. Srimati Radharani is Madanakya Mahabhava Mayi. She's the embodiment of Madhunaki Mahabhav. And so when Krishna adopts that mood of Srimati Radharani, he becomes Hemabhi Dibya Chavisundaraya. He becomes so very, very beautiful in this golden form. He's Mahaprema Rasa Pradaya. He's the giver of the mellow taste of the most exalted loving exchanges only found in Braj. This is described in the commentary. But another deeper meaning is that he's that personality who's giving that Mother Ujjvala Prema, or the essence of Mother Ras, which is Manjari Bhav. He's giving that thing. Mahaprema Rasa Pradaya. Pradaya means the giver of. He's Mahaprema Rasa, means that mood of the intimate maidservants of Srimati Radharani. And this mood represents the nectar of prem. Ananda, the word Ananda indicates that he's the embodiment of ecstatic bliss. And also Hemabha indicates that he has this golden radiance, this golden complexion, which is unprecedented, which is astonishing, which destroys ignorance. So we worship that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. A similar point is made by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the Anchalila chapter 5 of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, where he has a discussion with Pradyumna Mishra, who Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sent to hear from Ramananda Roy. Pradyumna Mishra approached Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and said, I would like to hear Krishna Katha from you. And Mahaprabhu said, well, better than hearing Krishna Katha from me is you hear Krishna Katha from Ramananda Roy, because he's the person that I go to listen to. Pradyumna Mishra was very impressed. And so he went to see Ramananda Roy, and Ramananda Roy was engaged in apparently Jagannath Vallabha Gardens, where his place is there today. His deity is there, of Krishna Gopal, very, very ancient deity, which we were speaking about recently in one of our parikramas here in Puri. It's a very unusual deity. It has 4 arms, but 2 of those arms have a shankha and a chakra, like the symbols that Jagannath carries, and 2 of those arms he's holding a vangsi and playing on it. And Fakir Mohan Babu spoke to us, and he told me that there's only 3 deities that he's ever heard of in all of India that have that particular iconography or that particular form. One of them is in the Jagannath Mandir, one of them is the Krishna Gopal deity at Jagannath Vallabha Gardens, and the third, who I also had darshan of, is in the museum, State Museum in Bhubaneswar. So that deity, it's a long, complicated thing to explain, but just to put a little something in the ether for those of you who know something about the book Lalita Madhav, that's the deity of Nava Vrindavan, which is discussed by Srila Rupa Goswami in Lalita Madhav, which is also discussed in a number of other Goswami literatures, including Brihad Bhagavatamrita, including Raghunath Das Goswami's Mukta Charit, including Rupa Goswami's Ujjvala Nilamani. And interestingly, according to Fakir Mambu, and significantly, this conception about Nava Vrindavan is found in Odia literature before the time of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So there's a little trail some of you might want to follow about this subject matter. It's a very interesting thing. So Mahaprabhu, he told Pradyumna Mishra that you should go to hear from Ramananda Roy. Probably that was at Jagannath Vallabha Gardens. Pradyumna Mishra went there very excited. This is a person Mahaprabhu hears from. And he went there, and it seems that Pradyumna Mishra was a very first-class brahmachari. He's a Brahmin, Mishra is a Brahmin name. And he went there and he saw that Ramananda Roy was putting oil on the naked bodies of dancing girls and massaging their bodies. And he was pretty shocked. And so he went back to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and expressed his shock. And Mahaprabhu then began to speak to him about the glories of Ramananda Roy and about the glories of Krishna Katha. And it has something to do also with this verse that we're hearing today. So Mahaprabhu told Pradyumna Mishra, Brajavadu Sange Krishna Rasadi Bilas Jai Jana Kahe Sune Koriya Vishwas. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare. Hridroga Kama Tanya Tat Kale Hoyak Shoy. Tina Gunak Shobha Nahi Mahadira Hoy. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare. He says that that person who hears about the Braja Badhu Sangha, the association of Krishna with the Braj Gopis, his Ras Leela pastimes, Krishna or Rasadi Bilas, that person, if he hears that Shune, hearing, Koriya Bisvas, with great faith, then Hridroga Kama Tana Tatkali Hoyak Shoy. That Hridrog, that disease of the heart, that lust, that Kama, Tatkali Hoyak Shoy, it becomes nullified. And Tina Gunak Shobha Nahi, that personality is not disturbed by the three modes of material nature. Mahadirahoy, he's a very, very sober personality. So for us, those of us in this material world who are being tortured by Cupid, who are being tortured in so many ways by material desires, this is a path of deliverance. And this is indirectly indicated in this verse today. That Mahaprabhu is Ananda lilamaya vigrahaya. He's the vigraha of that Ananda lila. What is that he's a personification of that Ananda lila. What is that Ananda lila? That's the Ras lila. And therefore the third line says, Tasmai Mahaprema Rasa Pradaya. That he's giving this Mahaprema Ras. Because he's Ananda lila moy vigrahaya. He's the embodiment of that Ananda lila. So that Ananda lila is there in Dwapara Yuga with Krishna and Radha, but it's not understood, and we're not able to approach it. But when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came with his associates, and Mahaprabhu is the embodiment of that Ananda lilamaya, that Ananda lila, then Tasmai Mahaprema Rasa Pradaya, that Ananda lila was being given freely by associates like Ramananda Roy and others. So Mahaprabhu is telling Pradyumna Mishra here that you should understand that if you hear with Visvas, if you hear with faith about these pastimes, about the Ras Leela with the gopis, then the Hridrog, the heart disease, becomes nullified and you become Mahadira, a greatly sober person. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta comments on this verse in Chaitanya Charitamrita. He describes that anyone who's serious about hearing the pastimes of Krishna's Ras Leela, anyone who has some serious inclination for that, those pastimes which are discussed in the Bhagavatam, they have great faith in it. They have what he calls a transcendental spiritually inspired mind, Prabhupada translates. That person is immediately freed from the natural lusty desires found within the heart of a materialistic man. And Prabhupada goes on in that purport. Let me go ahead and put this in the chat here. It'd be nice, I think. When a pure Vaishnava speaks on Srimad Bhagavatam, and another pure Vaishnava hears Srimad Bhagavatam from such a realized soul, both of them live in the transcendental world where the contamination of the modes of material nature cannot touch them. So, several observations about this. First of all, in light of Srila Prabhupada's behavior, his giving the Srimad Bhagavatam in the form of Krishna book, the 10th canto, along with the 5 chapters about the Ras Leela, a point which I often make, how he was giving this thing freely. And another point which we can dwell on too is Srila Prabhupada's frequent insistence that his disciples were pure devotees. Now when we say that Prabhupada's disciples were pure devotees, or they are pure devotees, it's a little controversial, isn't it? Some people, they protest, they say, wait a minute, I knew about one sannyasi who was close to Prabhupada, and he ended up being a homosexual male striptease dancer who left his body from AIDS. So that doesn't sound like a pure Vaishnava. But Prabhupada insisted they are pure Vaishnavas. And if we study in the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, in the famous verse, Apichet Sudaracharo Bhajate Mamananya Bhak Sadareva Samantavya Samyaghi Vyasito Hi Saha, that Krishna says very emphatically, Sadareva Samantavya, this is a sadhu, this person. He's a durachari sadhu. The word durachari is used, but the word sadhu is also used. He's a durachari sadhu, meaning that his achar is durachar. It's not very good. But because he's doing ananyata bhajan. Now what is ananyata bhajan? We've often commented on this verse. For those of you who may not remember, it's a very important point. For some of us in our society who frankly may not have so much strong faith in the holy name, or in the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his devotees, we like to define ananyata bhajan as bhajan which is completely free from any fragrance, even the scent of material desires. But that's not what Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says in his Saartha Bharshani commentary on that verse in the Gita. There he describes that it means that the devotee is pure because he's not taking shelter of karma, gyan, or yoga. So Srila Prabhupada's insistence that his disciples, or sometimes he said all of my disciples, are pure devotees, it's correct. Shastrically, what Srila Prabhupada is saying, because they're not taking shelter of karma, gyan, yoga, worship of the devatas, they're just taking shelter of Krishna. But it doesn't necessarily mean that their achar, their behavior is always perfect. So when we read this first sentence, when a pure Vaishnava speaks in Srimad Bhagavatam and another pure Vaishnava hears Srimad Bhagavatam from such a realized soul, both of them live in the transcendental world where the contamination of the modes of material nature cannot touch them. So, wow, that's quite a heavy statement. But I would suggest that we can understand this in several different ways. One is that this is Srila Prabhupada's desire for ISKCON, and this is what he felt that ISKCON was. That it was a society of pure Vaishnavas, because they're not taking shelter of karma, gyan, yoga, or demigod worship. And every day we're having Srimad Bhagavatam. So such a person who's in the society is a pure Vaishnava. He's a speaker. Another person who hears that, he's also a pure person. And he's hearing from a realized soul. Now, what does Prabhupada mean here by realized soul? Well, again, we're going to speak on this in two different ways. And right now I'm speaking on a very simple, basic level. Realization means that someone's realized this is the topmost thing. They have that kind of faith, to some extent or another. And if you read this, then both of them are living in the transcendental world. That's our temples, where the contamination of the modes of material nature cannot touch them. Okay, now let's go to another level about this. And that is that well, it doesn't always work that way, does it? It hasn't always looked that way. So, someone who's a pure Vaishnava means a pure devotee who has no material desires, and when they speak on the Bhagavatam. Another meaning here is that if we hear from Srila Prabhupada, or if we hear from Gurudev or a Sudha Vaishnava about the Bhagavatam, then we're living in this transcendental world. Another meaning is if we repeat what we've heard from them. So it means it's not just a cheap thing, but at the same time, the wealth of this statement, or the high cost of this statement, if we say something that's the opposite of cheap, the statement's not cheap, then it's what is the wealth, what is the expense in this statement? The expense is that someone's a pure Vaishnava meaning they're a premi bhakta. But that opulence, which is inferred here in the sentence, is that we should go and find out such a person. Jaho Bhagavata Pada Vaishnavedastani. This is the instruction of Sri Damodar Goswami. You go and you hear Srimad Bhagavatam, Jaho Bhagavata Pada Vaishnavarastani Ekanta Ashraya Kori Chaitanya Charani. And by doing that, you take shelter of the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So we want to do that from someone in the line of Srila Prabhupada, but also it's not just an institutional thing, like sometimes devotees make it, and it can become cheap, where, well, just anybody who's a member of the church, just like when I was growing up in a Christian family, whenever somebody would die, if they were a member of the church, they would just go to church for Easter and Christmas twice a year, or maybe on Sundays only, and the rest of the time they were complete nonsense. Everybody would say, oh, they went to heaven. And sometimes devotees in a similar way, they say they went back to Godhead. So that's a rather sentimental kind of thing. We want something more serious than that. We have to, if we simply look, if you say the qualification for someone is just that they're a member of ISKCON and they're just reading what Srila Prabhupada said, then that's okay in the beginning, perhaps, because if you have someone like that, that'll be okay. But if it's so simplistic that that's all that you want, then you may get in trouble at some point. Because you may find that there's persons like all of us, I think, we can repeat so many things from the Bhagavatam, and it's good that we're doing that. We're purifying ourselves by doing that. But we may not have such a deep level of realization, and there may be some problem. Okay? So let's go on a little bit. I'm sorry for spending so much time on that one sentence, but I think it's just really a very powerful sentence. He said, free from the contamination of the modes of nature, okay? So when we're hearing this topic, we become free from the modes of nature. When we're free from the modes of nature, the speaker and the hearer are fixed in a transcendental mentality, knowing that their position on the transcendental platform is to serve the Supreme Lord. We were speaking recently with Ujjwala Rasagya about this, that our goal is not prema. Our goal is seva. It's prema seva in particular. And we've discussed that in other sessions, and I could support that in many different ways, but I don't want to divert so much from our focus today. So when we become free from the modes of material nature, it means we become free from our selfishness. We become freed in a transcendental mentality. We understand that the whole purpose is to serve the Lord. But not everybody in our society has that understanding. And Srila Prabhupada goes on to discuss about another category of persons. He says, the class of men known as Prakrita Sahajiyas, who consider the transcendental pastimes of Lord Krishna something like the behavior between a man and a woman in the material field, artificially think that hearing the Rasa Leela will help them by diminishing the lusty desires of their diseased hearts. But because they do not follow the regulated principles, but instead violate even ordinary morals, their contemplation of Rasa Leela is a futile attempt which sometimes results in their imitating the dealings of the gopis and Lord Krishna. So this may give us a little window of understanding in Srila Prabhupada's annoyance, famously with the Gopi Bhav Club in Los Angeles, when the volumes of Chaitanya Charitamrita started coming out, and there was a group of devotees who read about this mood of the gopis, and wow, this is the topmost thing, and we want to hear this. And so they started coming together and reading this thing, which is exactly what's being spoken about here in the purport. But Srila Prabhupada, he became very, very annoyed and upset. Someone told him, there's a little history to it. I've heard two different sides to that story. Generally, we cite that story as an example that it's just bad and you just should not do it. But I spoke with some of the devotees who were there, and one of the devotees told me that somebody wrote to Srila Prabhupada, and they said that one of the devotees in the group had an abortion, had illicit sex, and had an abortion, and they were thinking, anyway, it's okay because I'm hearing this very high kata kind of thing. And Prabhupada was so very, very upset about that. Now, I don't know exactly how true that is. But in any case, I don't think anybody can argue that Srila Prabhupada wanted us to read Chaitanya Charitamrita together. Not just us, but he wanted the non-devotees to read those books which we were distributing on Sankirtan. So Prabhupada's making a point here that someone, sahaja means something easy. and prakriti means material nature, someone who's thinking that I can just very easily do something on the material platform. And they have this, they don't have a proper understanding about the nature of the Ras Leela. And they think it's artificially that's going to help them give up their lusty desires. But they're not following the regulative principles. So what does this indirectly mean, at least to me? This indicates that they're not hearing from Guru, they're not taking shelter of Guru. Someone who's hearing properly from Guru, Prabhupada's first insistence was they should follow regulative principles. That's what it means to follow the Guru. And Prabhupada wanted the devotees to read these things. If someone's hearing from Guru, then, and they're following regulated principles, then these lusty desires will go away. And they may understand that no, this is not because they're hearing from Guru, that these pastimes of the Ras Leela, it's not like the behavior between a man and a woman. But the point is we have to hear. It's so very, very important. There's Navavidi Bhakti. There's 9 different types of Bhakti, and it all begins with Shravan, with hearing. And we want to hear from the right source. We don't want to just hear in an institutional way. That's not going to satisfy us. Then it'll just become mundane religion, as we see in Jagannath Puri. There's so many people, they have dramas in Puri and in Vrindavan where they have Ras Leela dramas, and afterwards so many of the persons do abominable things. They smoke, they drink, they do whatever, because they're not hearing properly from Sadguru. They're not taking shelter of someone and following regulated principles. So to go on. To forbid such habits of the Prakriti Sahaja, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has excluded their material intelligence by using the word Visvas. In Srimad Bhagavatam 10.33.30, Srila Shukadev Goswami says, Naitat samajaret jatu manasapi yanishvaraha vinasya charan modyad yata rudra vijams visham. That certainly one who's not the Supreme Personality of Godhead should never, even within his mind, imitate the activities of the transcendental Ras Leela of Krishna. If out of ignorance one does so, he'll be destroyed, just as if he were to imitate Lord Shiva, who drank poison produced from the ocean. So this is a very, very important point, and I would like to suggest, in our little Sangha here, oftentimes, practically every session, it seems that we end up speaking something about institutionalism and the nature of mundane religion, because many of us are not satisfied with that. We're disgusted with that, and sometimes even we find it within our own society. So Prabhupada here is giving an essence to tell us what's the difference between the two. And externally it may look the same. They're chanting Hare Krishna, they're reading Srimad Bhagavatam, they're doing all these things. But the difference is who's taking shelter of Guru and who's hearing Krishna Katha in a proper way. And if we're doing that, then it means we're not imitating. But if we're not hearing in a submissive way, as we oftentimes comment, Ramanujacharya in his Gita Bhashya commentary on Bhagavad Gita, he says there's 3 qualities of Shravan Adhikar, qualification here, Pranipat, Pariprashna, Seva. If we're not submitting ourselves, Pranipat, if we're not doing Pariprashna, inquiring and revealing our heart whatever doubts we have, if we're not doing Seva, serving the speaker and the message, then we don't have Adhikar for hearing that thing. And then we don't develop that Visvas, that faith. Rather, we become like a Prakriti Sahaja. So I felt that this purport of Srila Prabhupada was very indicative of this verse today. And then the next verse in Chaitanya Charitamrita that Mahaprabhu is speaking to Pradyumna Mishra, he says something which has a few words right out of our verse today. And go ahead and sing these, and I'll also put these on the screen here. Ujjvala Madhura Prema Bhakti Se Pai Ananda Krishna Madhurji Bihare Sadai Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Prabhupada translates this: tasting transcendental, effulgent, sweetly ecstatic love of Krishna. What a bunch of superlatives. Let me do that again. Tasting transcendental, effulgent, sweetly ecstatic love of Krishna. Such a person can enjoy life 24 hours a day in the transcendental bliss of the sweetness of Krishna's pastimes. So this is ananda lilamaya vigrahaya. This is that ecstasy, premadya, that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is distributing to everyone. We can taste this by the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and that mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu comes again through the mercy of the devotees. If we think we can separate the two, then we're an illusion. Then we become prakriti sahajas. If we try to go to Krishna on our own without Gurudev. So I'd like to speak a little bit more, a couple more minutes, about adhikar for rasakatha. I studied this a little bit. Some interesting points. Bhaktivinoda Thakur in Chaitanya Sikshamrita, which Srila Prabhupada said, at one point he said, this is Bhaktivinoda Thakur's most important book, Chaitanya Sikshamrita. He says there in the Bengali, Jada Bada Jiva Krishna Lila Shravane Anadikari. That someone who's a Jada Bada Jiva, who is a materially conditioned soul, Krishna Lila Shravane Anadikari. He has no qualification to hear Krishna's pastimes. Well, gee, that kind of just stops us. It's like a brick wall. You're speeding along in your nice car of Krishna Lila and Krishna book, and all of a sudden you hit this brick wall. That Jadabhava Jiva has Krishna Lila Shravane Anadikari. What does that mean? In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, he describes that, I'm trying to remember the Bengali, Diksha Kali Bhakta Kori Atma Samarpana, that at the time of Diksha, when someone takes initiation and is Atma Samarpana, a minor detail, they're completely surrendered with everything, Krishna considers their body to be non-different from himself. And as we sometimes discuss, such a person is considered to be a Nitya Siddha. Prabhupada writes in Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila 8, I think it is. That person is considered to be a Nitya Siddha. We shouldn't consider them in a mundane way. We shouldn't consider them to be a jiva, a materially conditioned jiva. They have qualification to hear. Or as Srila Bhaktisiddhanta describes, again in that same article, which we oftentimes quote, the associates of Sri Chaitanya, that the jiva has no ability to serve Krishna, he has no ability to hear Krishna, but by taking shelter of Guru, he becomes a part of Gurudev. He becomes like an expansion of Guru. And then he has some qualification. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, again in Prema Pradeep, in the 10th chapter, 10th ray of that book, it describes about conjugal rasa and swakiya and parakiya, and how that should be discussed or not discussed. And he says there, I'm just reading from the English, regarding swakiya and parakiya, these are confidential truths which should be privately learned at the feet of one's spiritual master. Let me put this on the screen also. This is really good. Regarding swakiya and parakiya, these are confidential truths which should be privately learned at the feet of one's spiritual master. If I explain this topic in the assembly, it could be harmful for the unqualified devotees. Higher truths cannot be attained unless one is situated in a higher platform, just as higher knowledge gradually rises in all scientific literature. Likewise, confidential truths are attained in devotional literatures by proper qualification. So, a very, very important point Bhaktivinoda Thakur is making, that we should not distribute, we shouldn't speak about these things even with devotees. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur in Jaiva Dharma, when he speaks about the activities of the behavior of the Madhyamadikari, he, as often we also quote this, it's something I find very interesting. He says that when he speaks about upeksha means neglect, he says that neglect doesn't mean that he won't look at them, an envious person, because Practicing neglect to someone who's dvisatsu or envious doesn't mean that he won't look at that person, but it means that they don't speak Krishna Katha with that person. It's such a very, very important point. And I've seen many devotees become a little inspired in the beginning by hearing higher katha, higher topics, and that's a good thing. We should want that. There's a reason Srila Prabhupada gave us Krishna book. There's a reason why he gave us Tulsi prayers and these things. He wanted us to become attracted by these things. But I see sometimes devotees, they become attracted and they're sentimental and they don't have very much practical wisdom, and therefore they want to start trying to share these with everyone. And then what happens, boy, they get in big trouble. There's some friends of ours in Mayapur who started reading Govinda Lilamrita and some different things. I'm not advocating everybody do that, but they started reading some of those higher books, and then they got so excited by it. This is so nectar. Someone asked them to give Bhagavatam class, and they started speaking about it in Bhagavatam class. And not only was that the last Bhagavatam class they gave, this was a few years ago, they still haven't given class again. They banned them. They're not asking them to give class now. But not only was it the last class they gave, but it also created a big uproar in the community. And there was a lot of controversy and criticism and things. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Prema Pradeep is very clear that these kind of truths should be privately learned at the feet of one's spiritual master. Again, who is a spiritual master? Spiritual master means someone that I have faith in. That's the simplest definition of guru. Someone that I have faith in. If I have that shraddha, that faith in him, if I have that drita shraddha, then I can hear that properly. But he says, if I speak this topic in a general assembly, it could be harmful for unqualified devotees. So it's a very important thing we should understand about adhikar. And we should be careful about where we share these topics. I can share something again with you from Bhaktivinoda Thakur. This is from Chaitanya Sikshamrita, from the sixth shower in the sixth session. He says, not everyone is qualified to read the daily pastimes of Radha and Krishna. It is esoteric knowledge of great wonder which must be kept secret. The devotee should not let those who are not qualified hear these topics. As long as the soul has not attained greed for the spiritual world on the path of rag, the description of these pastimes must be kept hidden from him. As long as we haven't developed greed for this thing on the path of rag, spontaneous attraction, as long as a person has no realization of the pure spiritual nature of the transcendental form, name, form, qualities, and pastimes of Krishna, he has no qualification for hearing his pastimes. As long as he has no realization of the pure spiritual nature of these things. No realization. And that realization will come when we render service. We'll get this Katha Ruchi when we render service to Gurudev. Hearing his pastimes, the unqualified person will simply meditate in material relationships of male and female under the influence of Maya, and by this he'll become degraded. There's so many translations of Gita Govinda. It's been translated practically, I think, maybe in the Eskimo language. It's been translated in practically every language in the world. It's one of the most translated books in the world. But who can understand it? It just seems like some beautiful love story or something. Bhaktivinoda says, the reader with great care should attain initiation into the Sringara Ras like Narada, and then he can enter the pastimes. In other words, we should take shelter of Guru, to put it in a very simplistic way. Otherwise, material logic will cast the heart into darkness. Those who are qualified should read and meditate on the descriptions of the pastimes daily. This will remove all sin and bestow the spiritual mood. The pastimes are human-like, but though they appear worldly, they are amazingly spiritual for the person possessing all power and all good qualities. Using these pastimes, Govinda Lilamrita and many other works have been written. The qualified person on reading them experiences bliss. By By understanding the Sringara Rasa, which is discussed in the next chapter, the Raganuga devotee, meditating on the excellent pastimes, performs his eternal service to the Lord. This constitutes his daily worship. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was instructed that the devotee should consider carefully the following verse from 5 chapters on Rasa Lila from the Bhagavatam. The word faith here means faith in non-material objects. And then he quotes this famous verse from the 33rd chapter, last chapter of the Rasa Lila. Vikriditam vajavadu beridam chavishno shadanvito nunishanayad atavarna yadyaha bhaktim padam bhagavati pratilabhyakamam hridyogamasya chachirena dira. That when we hear about these pastimes between the gopis and Krishna, but if we hear this shadanvito, with faith, what does it mean to hear it with faith? If you're just only reading it from a book, why are you only reading it from a book? Because the books say we should hear from a person. Jaho Bhagavata Pada Vaishnavedastani. We should hear the Bhagavatam from a devotee. Why are you only hearing from a book? Well, Prabhu, to tell you the truth, I don't really have faith in anyone. Okay, then you're not Shadanvito. And this verse doesn't apply to you. And we should be careful with such persons who don't really have faith. They may have some kind of churchianity faith. They may have some institutional kind of faith, and that's okay. They're neophyte devotees, but they have komala shraddha. Their faith is very, very soft. And the proof is they don't have faith in a person. And if you don't have faith in a person, then how can you have faith that the process works? So if I have faith in this person, I'm hearing from them properly, then all these lesser desires will go away. Hridroga masa pahinotya chedena diraha. All the lust that's in the heart will go away, and such a person very quickly will become dhira. So these are the points I wanted to stress in this verse, that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is ananda lilamaya vigraha. He's the vigraha, he's the embodiment of this ananda lila. All of that is in him, it is him. He's a personification of that. And tasmaya mahaprema rasa pradaya, he's giving this. Prema rasa means also, mahaprema rasa means the rasa lila. He's giving this, but how is he giving this? Madharo jala premadya Shri Rupa Nuga Bhakti da Shri Gora Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namostute. He's giving it through Ramananda Roy. He's giving it through Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He's giving it through those devotees who are adya, who are enriched with this Madhurja Prem, who are Rupa Nuga devotees, who are following Rupa Goswami, and who become Gora Karuna Shakti. The Gora Karuna Shakti Vigraha. They become the personification of that mercy potency of Gauranga Mahaprabhu. We hear from them. And then we can understand this Ananda Lilamaya Vigrahaya. And if we think that this verse only speaks of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and we try to approach Mahaprabhu alone on the strength of this verse, we'll always be cheated. And this is why it'll be very confusing for us. We may see that Prabhupada says, when a pure Vaishnava speaks in Srimad Bhagavatam and another pure Vaishnava hears Srimad Bhagavatam from such a realized soul, both of them live in the transcendental world where the contamination of the modes of material nature cannot touch them. So that's a fact, what Prabhupada is saying. But what is a pure Vaishnava? A pure Vaishnava is someone who's heard from their Gurudev. The pure Vaishnava is someone who has faith, who has Shraddha, who has faith in their Gurudev. If we hear from such a person, that's a very different thing. And this is the difference that I see between Srila Prabhupada's movement, what he wanted, what the pure Gaudiya Vaishnava movement is, and what I see here in Jagannath Puri. Here in Jagannath Puri, and also in Vrindavan, and also in Navadvip, we find many Vaishnavas who like to hear the Rasa Lila in the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam. And they're hearing from someone else who seems like a devotee, but Prabhupada goes on to describe that because they're not following the regulated principles, then they're prakrita sahajyas. So we don't want to become Prakriti Sahajas. I'm not suggesting that we all have qualification to be reading and hearing these things, but we should understand what that qualification is. And I will say this much with great certainty, great confidence, that we all, if we're initiated in this line, we should read all of Srila Prabhupada's books and we should discuss them. But we should do that following regulated principles and hearing from a proper personality's Guru Karuna Shakti. So I'm sorry, I went over time. I'd like to hear from the devotees now. If anybody has any reflections. We're a little bit late, so devotees can be a little brief in their discussion. Ujjwala Rasiga, you usually have to go first. Are you there with your famous brick wall behind you? Do you want to share some reflection with us? Going outside to the brick wall. Later on, somebody's going to have to put a brass sign or something on this is the Ujjwala Rasiga's brick wall where she always made her comments.
My pranams to you, Prabhuji, to all the devotees. Prabhuji, no brick wall now. Is this okay for today? I'm not sure.
The brick walls will deepen you.
Very nice, Kata Prabhuji, as usual. Very striking point, very relieving point that can help put the pieces together is Gauranga or Krishna are not by themselves. They are with the Guru and devotees together. So they're all one unit. And if I don't see that point, I may struggle for a very long time. And if I'm giving an excuse that I don't have faith in a devotee, but I would like to serve Bhagavan, then I'm not looking at the complete unit, not the whole piece. So that would be a work in progress no matter what. That's one point, Prabhuji. And second thing was the superlative description of 4 or 5 superlatives there: nectarian, wonderful, sweet, rasa, all that. That is all about what? The service. How can one be in that ecstatic mood always? Is by service, loving devotional service, Preeti Seva. So then I was thinking, many more superlatives also would be good for this loving devotional service. That was a nice thing to do. Last thing I wanted to mention was, I used to think impersonalists are somewhere out there and I am a devotee here. But I'm realizing how much of an impersonalist I am in the garb of a devotee. Because when I'm praying Gauranga, when I'm praying for his mercy, and when I take my beads for japa, how much of an impersonalist action that I'm doing. Just the words. And there is no faith that those transcendental personalities are present. They were manifested. But just some words, some actions trying to fix the things. Such an impersonal way of doing japa and prayer. That's what I thought. And at the most, it can get to the state of bogi. Even in bhakti also. How can I enjoy this japa? And how can I find pleasure even for my own self, even in Guru's instruction? So that mentality of a bogi and an impersonalist mentality were such unseen major obstacles. But with the prayers of these acharyas and the devotees, they help us break through those unseen obstacles which cannot be otherwise broken on my own accord, and make me a personalist, bhakti, a bhakta. Yeah, Prabhu, that's all I wanted to mention. Thank you.
Wow. Ujjwala Rasiga, I hope that you keep all these realizations and they'll always stay with you and become very, very deep and as you grow older in Krishna consciousness and bhakti, and your body gets older, I hope that you have very deep realizations and go so far and shares with everyone. It's really wonderful. Thank you. You know, you were speaking about devotee. Devotee means two things. Sometimes in the West we have a hard time understanding this, but most people in India understand this easier. Sadhu means someone who's a pure devotee. But sadhu also means a person who lives like a sadhu. Right? There's persons who... So devotee means someone who's pure. But devotee also, very simply, maybe we're not devotees, maybe we're not pure persons, as you were saying about yourself, you feel like that. But you are devotees by definition if we're hearing and chanting and taking shelter of that. Because that process is so very, very powerful. I just did an initiation ceremony for my godbrother Haladar Maharaj in Bhubaneswar. And I was very struck, very pleased to see his strong faith in the process and how he's just pushing devotees to stay away from Vaishnava aparad, to chant the holy names and to follow things properly. And I see his heart. He's very humble and he feels that he's not qualified. I know that. He feels that he's not a qualified person, but still he's doing this thing because he feels confident in the process. He has faith in that. And he's helping those devotees. The devotees who are coming to him, I see he's really giving them some serious stuff. If somebody wants to take initiation from him, good luck. He's really heavy. Like the brahmacharis, they usually sleep on the floor. They take prasadam once a day. They're very, very strict with so many things. But he's helping them. He's actually giving them something real. So anyway, there's a few reflections I had on your reflections. Thank you very much, Ujjwala. So let's see, Radha Jivan Prabhu, would you like to share something with us?
You mentioned earlier a small point, that our goal is not prema, but prema seva. I was just a little confused because I feel like prema seva is kind of implied.
Yes, exactly. Mahaprabhu prays, he says, Prema dhana vina vyartha durad jivan. That my life is durad jivan, it's poor unless I have this prema. So dasa kori veta mori deha prema dhana. You make me into your servant. And in our Gaudiya conception, we don't just speak about bhakti as devotion or love. I marked it when we used to go to Malaysia. Bhakti, the word bhakti you see quite often there. It means love. And bhakti in general means love. But Prabhupada didn't translate it as love. Prabhupada translated it as devotional service. And that's the real thing. And when we read in Chaitanya Charitamrita, in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, stories like Daruka, Krishna's chariot driver, who was fanning Krishna. He was serving him. But at that time, ecstatic symptoms started coming onto his body, and he started shaking, and tears came to his eyes. And he started praying to Krishna, please make these ecstatic symptoms go away. He was having asasatvikara bhava, which is a symptom of prema, but he wanted it to go away because it was a hindrance to his service. And this is gopi bhav. This is the mood of the gopis. There's zero desire for themselves. So yeah, that's a very important point. Is that helpful when I said?
Yeah, that helps. Another point I liked is that we must worship all forms of the Lord, including the devotees, in order to achieve Mahaprabhu's mercy.
And sometimes devotees hear that and they become confused and they say, well, gosh, it's not talking about these devotees around me. Oh my God. It's not talking about the devotees in Ypsilanti. I mean, come on, those guys, man. It must be talking about the devotees in the Gaudiya Math, or some devotees with the Babajis, or this or that, some really high Vaishnavas. But we give the example sometimes, life is like playing cards. And if you're playing cards, you're playing Old Maid or poker or whatever card game you're playing. You can only play the game according to whatever cards you've been given. So we're in this game of life, this journey of bhakti, and Krishna's dealt us a certain hand of cards. He's given us certain association. And let's deal with that. Let's associate with them in a nice way, which means by hearing and chanting together, by not criticizing, by not doing Vaishnava aparad. And if they're actually not the highest Vaishnavas, then Krishna will see, oh, he's behaving this way with these persons, giving them respect just because they're hearing and chanting. So now they have some qualification. I'll send them some higher association. Because even if we get higher association, what are we going to do with it? If we just want to sit around and talk about baseball or the war in Ukraine or whatever mundane thing which strikes our fancy, what's the value of that higher association? I think I told this story maybe last week. I want to mention it again. We were in, I think it was the last time we were in New Brajadam, maybe. We were there in the evening, and Shivarama saw me, and he said, oh, Madhavananda and Krishna Kun. He said, why don't you come to my house? He has a nice house there, and we can talk some. I said, yes, Maharaj. I was very happy. So we're walking together. And I wanted to say something from the heart. It was appropriate. We did speak about this the other day. Gorni Taipu made some comments, I remember. But let me just tell the story again. And I said, Maharaj, how is your health? And when I asked him that, the Gorni Taipu shaking his head, no, that's the wrong question to ask him. Maharaj stopped. And he became really annoyed with me. I was a little shocked. I've never seen him
he said,
annoyed.
Not you too.
Yeah, he said, not you too. He had some hope that we're going to speak some Krishna Katha. He said, why you ask me about my body? I want to hear about Krishna. So the last time we went to see him in Mayapur, a week or two ago, a couple of weeks ago, I was very careful. And we didn't ask about his health or anything. We just spoke some Krishna Katha to him. And our Guru Maharaj, remember, gave one lecture. There's some statement, I think, in Chaitanya Bhagavat that says that the sadhus, when you see a sadhu, you should ask bhajan koshal. How is your bhajan? That should be your question, not just how is your health. Of course, out of love, we may also even ask Gurudev, how is your health, Gurudev? But Gurudev's not pleased by that. He wants to hear something more transcendental. So this is how we associate together. It's such an important thing. Not just by talking about our bodies and by this thing and that, but by coming together and hearing and chanting about Krishna. Okay? Thank you, Radhajivan Prabhu. Tirthakar Prabhu, do you have any reflections you want to share? Nice to see you here, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. It was very nice. It was so many points. It's like we can make another several hours of katha just on reflections. And I really like that point where you mentioned these two things about the Sudurachara, that it is a sadhu who maybe has improper behavior. And I remember Bhaktivinoda Thakur is also explaining that Sudurachara, he's explaining actually the person who is attached, or let's say he has to still function on this material platform together with spiritual platform. So from that angle, he's also considered Sudurachara because he has to maintain certain material. He says that maintenance of the body, social status, mental development, cleanliness, austerity, nourishment, and struggle for existence. So all these things he considers they are related with the body. So they are also in the category of Sudurachara. So this, I really like that point you mentioned. And one more thing was about that we have to, one thing about listening, maybe these higher topics is the attitude. And another one is that when we speak it or we have to speak it in the proper association. And you mentioned this, you gave this example of these devotees who gave this class, and it was clearly not proper association. And the reaction was also like that, reaction was rather negative than the positive.
Yeah, sometimes I see, we if you've been around for some time, those of us, most of us here have, we have friends who sometimes have left ISKCON and gone here and there, and some of them have left because they say, why they've left, that I wanted to hear some higher katha. And I really got tired of the Bhagavatam classes, and it's always about, I remember seeing one ISKCON guru gave a Bhagavatam class in front of 100 initiated devotees in Los Angeles, and the whole class was different reasons from the Bible why we should be vegetarian. And so sometimes we feel discouraged. My God, I want to hear about Radha and Krishna, I want to hear about prema, and I'm just hearing from the Bible about vegetarianism. I mean, everybody there is a vegetarian, come on. What is it? But we should understand, as I was writing, I wrote a little kind of an essay on someone's Facebook page today. Maybe I'll paste it into our WhatsApp group. He was complaining about the institution, and I said a few things of my understanding of it and how it's like a school. And my grandma said it's like kindergarten. It's like kindergarten because they're teaching you how to pass stool, how to eat, and what is Bhagavad Gita, what is the basic things, and most basic things there are. And that's good. We need school. School is important. But we should also graduate from school. But at the same time, if we go a little bit higher, we've heard some higher things, and sooner or later we're all going to hear some higher things. We just read Prabhupada's books. Then we have to realize that the function of the school is for the new devotees. That's why it's there. And if I go in and I start speaking Govinda Lilamri to this and that, it's not appropriate. Even though this verses may be quoted in Chaitanya Charitamrita, which does quote Govinda Lilamrita quite a bit, it's not appropriate in that audience. And we hear in the Padma Purana, Shruti Smriti Purana, the Pancharatra Vidindina, Akaintaka Haribhakta, Upataye Vikolpate. Upataye Vikolpate will create a disturbance if we don't follow Shastra. And what kind of disturbance? There's two types of disturbance. One, a social disturbance. And everybody's going to become upset and they're going to get really angry. They're going to say, who is this Leela Purushottam? What can he, how does he dare talk about this in class? And it's going to be a big controversial thing. And the second disturbance it'll be a disturbance in my own heart. Because I'm not following proper Shastra. I'm speaking to people. Idam te nadapaskaya. Krishna, at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, we're not talking about Srimad Bhagavatam. We're not talking about Rasa. We're talking about Bhagavad Gita. Krishna very categorically at the end of Bhagavad Gita says, Idam te nadapaskaya nabhakte kadachana chashushushave bhacham nachamamyo amasuyave. Don't speak to these people. Idam te nadapaskaya. Nadapaskaya, someone who doesn't have any tapasya, who's not austere. Nabhaktaya kadachana, who's not a devotee. Nachashushushave vacham, who doesn't really want to hear from you. Or who's anasuyave, who's envious. Nasuyave, we don't want to hear. You can't speak to such a person, even Bhagavad Gita. And what to speak about these others. So if we don't understand that principle, then all of our so-called higher topics, which we think we're a higher Vaishnava because I've heard from Gorgovinda Maharaj, Ayendra, this or that, and I've heard all these things and I want to share, Narayan Maharaj or whatever, and I want to share these things. If we don't understand this principle, Krishna speaking in Gita, we should at first understand the basic principle. It just creates a disturbance. Okay, thank you, Tirtha Prabhu. Gorni Taipa.
Madhavendra Prabhu, I was just wondering if I can ask you one question.
Sure.
I'm listening now this meeting in Kurukshetra. I'm at the part 24, and just few parts back there was about Kamsa being killed, and there are a few explanations. Also, you mentioned in that somewhere is mentioned that he merged into Brahman. And somewhere is mentioned that he attained Sarupya Mukti. And then I came across one quotation from Bhaktir Samrita Sindhu, translated by Banu Maharaj, where it says, it is 1:2-79, the enemies of the Lord generally merge into the impersonal Brahman. Some of them, even though they attain semblance of a form similar to the Lord, Sarupya Abhasam, they remain absorbed in the happiness of a Brahman. Can you comment on that, Prabhu?
Yeah, I'm muted now. Can you hear me okay? It depends on the person. And Kamsa, it was Kalanini in his previous life. Kamsa, I don't know any description about his, I'm saying it slowly, I'm trying to remember, but I don't recall any description about his service in the spiritual world, like being Jaya Vijay or something like that. But he certainly took part in Krishna Leela in several incarnations. And as Bhaktivinoda Thakur says in Gita Mala, he uses the phrase Leela Pushtikari. He says that the demons, those persons who are envious of Krishna, they were lila pushtikari, they're nourishing the pastimes, they're doing some service. So clearly, Kamsa was doing some service like that. So what exactly kind of liberation he got is very hard to say. And he may have gotten Sayuja Mukti, he may have gotten Sarupya Mukti. It's a little difficult to say, but it's not, I would say that it's not such a hard and fast thing. And sometimes Vaishnavas, like Man Maharaj, when he translated that, he may have given a certain flavor because he's thinking of a certain audience. But it's not, those absolute statements like that are a little difficult to support. It may be different in different cases. That's the best I can suggest. Any other thought from you about that? Okay, you're more learned than me. Hare Krishna. Let's see. Anybody else here? Krishna Kun, do you want to share anything? Okay, you can just think about it for a second. How about Jai Gaur? I'm going to turn off my mic here.
I think that you mentioned Gorni Taipu was going to share something, but you didn't end up.
Okay, yeah. I'm sorry. Gorni Taipu. Go ahead. Somehow I was speaking about Gorni Tai and he was shaking his head so nicely. I thought you'd already spoke. Please forgive me. Go ahead, Prabhuji. Gorni Tai.
Thank you very much, but everything is in the hand of Krishna. So if you give me voice or not, that's all is perfect. So it's okay. So beautiful, wonderful reflections of Ujjvala Mataji, Rasika Mataji, and others. I'm really, really happy to be here and to get this opportunity to be part of this group. It's beautiful, and many, as Tirthaka Prabhu told that could be a new book, just following the reflections or a new class. So I would like to reflect one point which you mentioned that that in one point devotees is good if they daily meditate on these daily pastimes. And I'm mentioning this because I've got a book of, I don't know if it is possible to see, but it's a Gaudiya Stotra Ratna of game-like prayers of Gaudiya Vaishnavas. And it's given by Srila Shivaram Maharaj. And part of the book is three kinds of meditation, daily meditation. One is for Guru, one is on Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and one is on Krishna's pastime, daily pastimes. I would like to ask the meditation of Lord Chaitanya. It's a Shima Mahaprabhu Astakaliya Lila Smarana Mangala Stotra, means A for daily pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu given by Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. But as I read it, it's all about Navadvip pastimes of Navadvip life of Lord. But you speak about the main goal of Lord Chaitanya coming to the earth to experience this Radha Bhava. I'm not sure in these daily pastimes in Navadvip he could do it. Maybe not. I'm not properly understand that. But is it existing some daily pastimes, daily life of which is given by some acharyas in Puri, which we can also use for meditating on what the Hari is doing, going to Jagannath Mandir and what he's thinking, what he's feeling, how he says it's following him. So that's my question.
There's two books by Rasik Mohan Vidyabhushan, who was an associate of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, which are heavily Shastric books. He quotes so much Shastra. One's called Nilachala Braja Madhuri, and he speaks about Mahaprabhu's daily pastimes in Puri. And the other is Gambhiraya Sri Gauranga, which we're getting translated right now. Many times devotees have asked this question, and I would suggest it's a natural question. If we read in Chaitanya Charitamrita that Mahaprabhu fulfilled his three desires, in Jagannath Puri, then we see that the Eightfold Pastimes, which Vishwanath discusses, and which are basically the only ones, that the main ones at least, the only ones we see from our acharyas, it's all in Navadvip Leela. Why is that? Huh? So this is a very esoteric question, because obviously Mahaprabhu was having daily pastimes here. So I've thought about this quite a bit. I can only offer my own personal reflection on it. So you can take it or leave it as you like, if you find it valuable or not. But my conviction that I've observed in reading things from our Goswamis is they don't like to think about Mahaprabhu shaving his head. They don't like to think about him doing austerities and things. They like to think about him in Navadvip. And those are Nitya Leelas. That's one aspect. Now, another point is there, a point which we find, I found in Jiva Goswami's commentary in the, I think, 47th chapter of the 10th canto, and also in Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary in the 46th chapter of the 10th canto, that there's a very esoteric point, that there's a hidden chamber in Vrindavan. There's two chambers, a chamber of union and a chamber of separation. And the chamber of separation, and my Guru Maharaj also spoke about this quite often, not in depth, but he would mention it, that there's a chamber of separation which is a closed chamber. And that closed chamber is Jagannath Puri Leela. It's a chamber of separation. Jagannath Puri, according to, I think it's Madhya Leela chapter 22, but the Jagannath Puri is in the spiritual world. In the Mula verses of Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's described like that. It's a place in the spiritual world. But the pastimes which go on there are pastimes of separation. And Vishwanath and Jiva Goswami describe that in Vrindavan and Jagannath Puri, is Gupta Vrindavan, according to many different shastras, that the pastimes of separation in Vrindavan are a closed chamber. So this is my personal understanding of why Vishwanath gave the Astakaliya Smarna the way he did it of Mahaprabhu in Navadvip Leela. And it doesn't mean that I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't read or meditate on Mahaprabhu's pastimes like that as per the desire of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Every author wants people to read his book. The Goswamis and Vishwanath certainly wanted people to read his book. Well, we can read that, and I would suggest that when we read that, just as we hear in the Bhagavatam, I often quote, Anvaya Vreti Rekabhyam, we hear in two ways, directly and indirectly. So we hear directly, and then indirectly we think, oh, he's not mentioning Jagannath Puri. So that's there in our mind. And we're thinking of why he doesn't mention Jagannath Puri. And then we may read some of the prayers of Raghunath Das Goswami, where he speaks about Mahaprabhu's pastimes in Jagannath Puri. And we may read Rupa Goswami also has written some about Mahaprabhu's pastimes here. Is that helpful, Prabhuji? It's a very esoteric subject.
Yeah, definitely helpful. So that's definitely I have to read it because it's a beautiful players. And I hope that deeper and deeper I will understand it in the path of my devotion. So yes, thank you very much. That's also one part of meditation which I can use for daily to approach this.
See, another meditation we can have, we read these books because we're doing it for the pleasure of Guru and Krishna. And they don't like to hear, we don't speak about separation. Sometimes Mahaprabhu and Ramananda Roy and Subdamodar, in a certain aspect of Radharani's mood, they were speaking about that. But in general, as Narottam Das Thakur sings, Radha Krishna Pranamur, Yugala Kishore, my life is bringing Radha and Krishna together. And that's the purpose of our Goswami. So he's doing that in that Gauranga Lila Smarna Stotra. Thank you, Prabhu. Lila Purushottam, Prabhu, do you want to share anything?
I really liked Gornitai Prabhu's question. I asked you that question a few times. Well, for me, like most striking was the Chaitanya Shikshamrita by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and I have a few points that I need to reconcile. That there was at one point Bhaktivinoda Thakur states there in the text that the qualification for a hearing is that we have to have a genuine greed to attain Krishna Lila. And I'm connecting it with another passage of Chaitanya Shikshamrita actually, where Bhaktivinoda Thakur describes two kinds of kathas or hearing, or rather hearing, I would say. That one is, and it's in connection with, as he's describing the demons in Vrindavan Lila representing different anarthas and like that. And he says that the sadhaka must hear to both naimitic Lila, which is represented by these kind of pastimes, where Krishna kills the demons, and like the pastimes that are going on only in Bhauma Lila, not in Nitya Lila. And another part that he has to also proportionately hear to Nitya Lila, which means the descriptions of loving exchanges with his devotees throughout the rasas. No matter, but just that means like to be exposed to that beautiful picture of how loving relationship with Krishna looks like. And in that sense, my doubt in that statement is that we can hear those pastimes only after we develop the greed. Then my question is, then how, if I should strictly avoid hearing those pastimes describing loving relationship with Krishna and his devotees, even with the gopis for that case, then how am I supposed to get that greed in my heart? No, you're muted now.
Sorry. I personally feel that sometimes we make this greed into a big, huge thing when actually maybe it's a lot simpler than we think. And that doesn't mean that there's different layers of it. And the gopis also have a layer of faith. They also have Shraddha, but their Shraddha is wow, it's way beyond everything. And they also have greed, and their greed is a different type of greed. So we have a certain type of faith, we have a certain type of greed. So when we hear about it from Guru, and we develop some greed, some interest in that thing. That's so important. Srila Prabhupada wanted that. He wanted devotees. Shiva Ramaraj, he's chastising me. What are you asking about my body for? He wants to have association with devotees who are going to speak something about Krishna. That's the desire. But we should be careful and not do it in a sahaja kind of way. But if we're following the regulated principles, which I would suggest is not just, doesn't only mean four regulated principles, but regulated principles means I have a regulated lifestyle. I'm regularly hearing and chanting, and especially that hearing is so important. We had this discussion, I mentioned it in a few classes recently, that with Vatsal Prabhu, who's a Russian preacher, he brought a group of devotees, and we took them to Brahmagiri Amarnath. And he raised a question after one of our talks that how is it that some of the pandas that he speaks to, they're devotees of Jagannath and Krishna, but they're Mayavadis. And then in response, I commented how practically everyone in Orissa worships Tulsi. Practically everyone in Orissa, Smarta, Mayavadi, Sudha Vaishnava, Kamala Vaishnava, whatever, chants Hare Krishna. Practically everyone in Orissa does that. But the problem is they're not hearing from a proper source. They may be hearing some Bhagavatam, but if they're not hearing with regulated principles. So if we act according to regular principles, we hear in a proper way, and we're following principles, and we're serving Guru, then some interest will naturally arise. We're going to wonder about that. That's my humble thought. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
It just that was like the part that I really appreciated there in the text of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, that and it actually answers very clearly the how to say I don't want to use the word methodology, but how to approach it. That basically we should have the understanding that it's not meant for public, and I believe that that's part of what creates the that situation that you described in ISKCON. You know, in ISKCON we always hear only this, that, and only basics, and I desire to listen to the higher kathas, and so that's sprouting from that misunderstanding that we should expect it on the public lectures. Like I'm going to morning Bhagavatam class with 300 others, and I'm expecting that I will listen about Govinda Lilamrita, and that's from the from that point of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, that's wrong expectation, that's false expectation. And so I really very much appreciated his conclusion that these things must be revealed to sadhaka, aspiring devotee, one who even has that greed, who desires for it, by the guru. And by the guru, I understand it like in a personal relationship, meaning that one who speaks to me knows me and knows what to talk to me, and I have a faith, as we have discussed this Vikriditam Vrajavadubhir, and I really appreciate it as you mentioned today, also actually the same point, that it also this explanation of the word Shraddhanvito includes that I have a faith in one from whom I'm hearing it. That means to listen with a faith. And so if these things are there, present, then it makes like a proper situation that I may be nourished, I may meet my desire to listen something, but I shouldn't expect it like that I will hear it left and right, morning, evening classes, or wherever, whenever, from whomever, like that. So that matters.
There's a nice comment from Gorni Thai Prabhu here, which is relevant to what you're just saying too about greed. He says with Shiva Ramaraj once, he commented that if we hear regularly about devotees, and we have our appearance days and disappearance days of different Vaishnavas, we hear about their qualities, and they have greed, and we'll also get that greed by hearing about them. They're not just running around telling people about vegetarianism. Okay. Thank you, Prabhuji. Jaguar, would you like to share something, Prabhuji? I'm really sorry. I'm trying to finish things earlier. I think I'm going to have to, anyway, do something a little different every day. You want to share anything, Jaguar?
Sure, Prabhu. I really like the point that you mentioned earlier in class where you say you said your Guru Maharaj said this sometimes, that if you go to Krishna and you say, hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu, you're the ocean of mercy, please give me some mercy, and he'll say, I'm sorry, my mercy is no longer with me, it's with my devotees. I really like that. It's very sweet. And I was also thinking about kind of getting curious, these devotees, you mentioned those devotees who were reading Govinda Lilamrita, and they started speaking it in the Bhagavatam class in Mayapur, and I was kind of reflecting and thinking about, like the other Vaishnavas outside of ISKCON, like Gaudiya Math, they seem to have more less caution, I guess, about hearing rasa shastras, and I was just kind of thinking about how it happened like that devotees outside of ISKCON are not so cautious, and devotees in ISKCON are cautious, guys. I was wondering, would this same type of situation happen if it was outside of ISKCON? And like, how did things happen like that? Because of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, he was also, as far as I understand, pretty strict in that area. So I'm just kind of curious what you had to say about that.
I think in many ways our greatest asset is our greatest problem also. Our greatest asset is the fact that we're making so many new devotees, but it's also our biggest problem because we've got so many new people. And we're preaching a lot in the West. You know, some of my friends in the Gaudiya Math and things, they're mostly Indian devotees there, or devotees who are going there who are more mature and older devotees. And it's a different kind of audience. And like in India, most of the Gaudiya Math preachers, the senior ones, are Indian bodied, at least traditionally up until recently. And they're persons who grew up with Sanskrit, grew up with Bengali, grew up with the Gita and this culture, and they're already, on third base, so to speak, and we're just trying to hit the ball to get to first base. It's a big difference. So it's a natural thing. It depends on the sangha. I've also seen some Gaudiya Math sanghas and kathas. Just recently, I was invited by Dr. Devdas, who took part in that. Leela Purushottam Prabhu took part in that, yeah. And some discussion with some non-devotees, and we're speaking about the peace formula in the Gita and things. And there was a really nice Gaudiya Math sannyasi who was speaking, but when he was hearing my comments, and I was like reading non-devotee poems about vegetarianism and things, but he 2 or 3 times when he would speak, he said, "You're speaking very high things." He told me, and I can tell you, it kind of made me reflect, and I'm not trying to minimize him. He's a really wonderful Vaishnava. But what it said to me was that ISKCON is not the only sangha where devotees understand that when you speak to new people, you should speak in a simple way. And some of those sanghas that you're talking about, especially in the West, if you go to it, generally they're not doing so much outreach for new devotees. And a lot of them, they've been trying. I'm trying to be politically detached, but a lot of that, to give them a good motivation, let's say, to give them some credit. Maybe they're trying to help devotees who are feeling discouraged because they're just hearing brand new topics or basic topics always. So they want to give them something a little bit higher because that's what they've been hearing. So that goes on. So my Guru Maharaj wanted, as you know, that we should have these kind of topics within ISKCON. And that's partly why we give these classes and things too. We want to encourage devotees. And as we've said 100 times before, I think it doesn't mean that we should hate devotees in the Gaudiya Math or that's ridiculous. We should appreciate them, and they're our brothers and sisters, they're our friends. But this is my direct family of my Gurudev and Prabhupada's Seva Sangha that I'm trying to serve. And I also appreciate all Vaishnavas. When somebody was making a point recently about how there's a GBC law that we shouldn't have Siksha outside of ISKCON with other Vaishnavas. And they were talking this and that in Gaudiya Math. And I thought to myself, gee, I hear sometimes from Christians. I sometimes hear from Muslims. And some of them have really good comments, and I learned something from them. So am I taking Siksha? Because I'm friends with, what to speak of the Gaudiya Math, and generally I think in ISKCON we wouldn't have a problem if you're hearing from a Christian or a Muslim, if you're friends with that person. But we do have a problem if you're hearing something from the Gaudiya Math. I think that's a little unusual. Anyway, is that helpful something, Jagora?
Yeah, Prabhu, thank you. That was really nice.
Thank you. Is Bana there?
She's right here.
Okay. Oh, we always put you on the spot, Bana. I'm sorry. That is part of the program. We're putting Bana Biharni on the spot at the end. Do you have anything you want to share?
This point was really sweet and inspiring to me, that a pure Vaishnava is one who has heard from their Gurudev. It's really nice. And then I was also thinking about this point you made, that at the time of initiation, the body is considered non-different from Krishna. You said something like that.
Krishna says that. There's a verse in Chaitanya Charitamrita that begins, Diksha Kali, the time of Diksha, Diksha Kali, Bhakta Kori, Atma Samarpana, who's completely surrendered. Krishna says, I don't remember the next line, but he says, that devotee, I consider that devotee non-different from myself.
I was just thinking about what real initiation is, and now you're saying completely surrendered, so it seems like.
Yeah, look at it in this way. You can't do archana until you're initiated. Why? Once you're initiated, it's considered your body spiritual. Now it belongs to Gurudev. Now you can do archana. You can touch the deities, because touching the deities, touching Krishna. But because you've been accepted by Krishna's devotee, now you can do that thing. And of course, we're doing it within Vaidhi Bhakti. And Gurudev is telling us so many different rules and things, and we're following those things. But still, the principle is there. Okay? Thank you. Let me read this comment from Gaurani Thai Prabhu here. And Ujjwala Rasagi, are you still here? No, she's not. She had some question. She had one more question. She can put it in the WhatsApp group. So Gaurani Thai Prabhu was quoting 9.463 of the Bhagavatam. I'm going to skip the Sanskrit. The print's so small, my eyes are not good. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said to the Brahman, okay. Aham bhakti paradino, yasvatante vadvija, sadhavir gresa hridayo, bhakti jana priya. I know this verse, so nice. I am completely under control of my devotees. Indeed, I'm not at all independent. Because my devotees are completely devoid of material desires, I sit only within the core of their hearts. What to speak of my devotees? Those who are devotees of my devotees are very dear to me. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur has commented on this. I've said this many times. I want to repeat it again because it's just one of the coolest things I've ever heard. He said that Krishna is the Paramatma in the heart of the devotee. But who is the Paramatma in the heart of Krishna? It's the devotee. And in this verse means this thing, the devotees in Krishna's heart. So he's the Paramatma of the Paramatma, the devotees. All right. So thank you all very much. It's really late. I'm going to have to take rest here pretty soon. I feel bad. Jaguar, is it okay for you guys? I mean, you have to go to work and whatever. I'm not screwing you up completely, for those of you in America.
No, we'll always be here.
Radhajeevan, you don't have to go to the office and clock in or something. Thank God. The cows don't mind. All right. Okay, nice to see everybody. So we'll see everybody again next week then. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Samaveda Bhakta Binda ki jai, Go Premanandi Hari Hari Bo, Vancha Kalpa Darubhyascha, Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patita Nampa